Like so many other people, I was introduced to Yoko Taro and the genius that is his mind through NieR Automata, one of my favorite games to date. A beautifully depressing experience that asks us questions about purpose, self, and that which makes us human. So when NieR Replicant 1 String of Numbers was announced, I was already there. You, Yoko Taro, have earned my trust, my attention, and my day one purchase. Never change, you beautiful, beautiful man. And now, friends, having completed the game and viewed all of its endings, the time has come. Time to dive back into his cruel, uncaring world full of sadness and despair to see what makes this game so beloved. This is my journey with NieR Replicant. NieR Replicant doesn't make the best first impression, or second, and maybe even third. I mean, what the heck is this game? You're farming, you're fishing, you're delivering packages and doing the inane and mundane chores of every person you run into on the street, all while your sister is at home dying of a painful, incurable disease. Alone. What? Are you confused? You should be. For a good portion of this game, you'll feel like an errand boy as you traverse the world going back and forth over and over and over again, doing fetch quest after fetch quest with a few quick boss battles scattered throughout the journey. Upon realizing this, you may find yourself thinking, I thought this was a story-based hack and slasher, so what's with all this fluff and filler? Am I playing the right game? How could this have been the predecessor to NieR Automata? And you know what? You'd be forgiven for thinking so. See, your enjoyment and experience with Replicant largely hinges on how you decide to approach and play this game. Are you a completionist looking for a platinum? Because if so, there will be a lot of backtracking, a lot of grinding and material farming, a lot of side quests that feel like nothing more than pointless time wasters. It's like playing the worst parts of an MMO, only in single player format. And if you're like me, you'll quickly find yourself exhausted, demotivated, and wondering if this is really the best use of your time. However, if you play it for the main story and do only as many side quests as needed to unlock the different endings, plus the one where you get Popola's drink, definitely do that one, I think you're likely to have a much better time and a much smoother experience. Speaking of smooth, that's exactly how I would describe movement and combat. Ooh, nice transition. I don't know how this felt in the original releases of NieR, but here, both are swift and snappy, and very reminiscent of Automata. Attack combos, while somewhat basic and based on which of the 3 weapon types you have equipped, is nuanced in that each weapon has its own weight class that affects your timing and vulnerability gaps between swings. Sounds inconsequential, but it is important as you'll often be dodging projectiles or swarmed by numerous enemies that enjoy using hit and run tactics just as much as you. Do you want to constantly put on the pressure with a series of quick jabs? Or would you rather put all that force into one big swing, hoping they don't interrupt you first? You don't really have to choose, as you are free to quick swap between the 3 weapon types mid-combo, mixing and matching with Weiss's numerous magical abilities to create a balanced playstyle or a destructive loadout. And while it does get a bit tiresome fighting the same types of enemies as you repeatedly run back and forth through the main zones, the feeling of combat itself and of effortlessly maneuvering your character feels good and never gets old. One of the things I did not expect was just how important the OST would be to my enjoyment of this game. I'm not kidding when I say that the music alone is what carried me through those dark times of being a substitute postman and was the only thing that kept me from straight up shelving Replicant early on in the playthrough. I mean, what a phenomenal OST. These tracks have been so masterfully composed to hold the emotional weight and impact of the story, the game, and its characters, punching you in the gut time and time again. Kaine's theme, Emil's, the Song of the Ancients, so many tracks are able to perfectly capture that mystical and otherworldly feeling while at the same time remain both familiar and melancholic. The music sets the tone of this bleak, uncaring world. Each track tells a story, the story of a place, a moment, a person, their journey, allowing us to feel and connect with the setting in a way that no game does, not even Automata. It doesn't just hit different, it pummels you in a way that few soundtracks can, and will stay with you long after you finish the game. It's the heart and soul of this experience, and it's absolutely beautiful. Period. Assuming you can push past the slow opening, you'll find that NieR is a game about perspective. Everything is one way until it isn't, and it's because of our limitations as people, unable to see beyond our own view of events and the world around us, that we often set ourselves on the path of tragedy and ruin. Replicant reminds us that there's always another side to every story, and that both sides of a conflict can be in the right and wrong at the same time. It's a realistic depiction of our own world, where we are all, unknowingly and unintentionally, in each other's way, the opposing force, the obstacle of someone else's story. What would you do if you knew, if you could see, if you could understand and empathize with all sides and perspectives? Would you do anything different? Could you do anything different? Or is it all inevitable, destined to tragically play out in the exact same way? These are some of the questions that NieR has the player confront throughout its playthrough, and is what earns this game its reputation and praise as an experience unlike any other. When its themes and messaging finally arrive and take center stage, they are so powerful, so impactful, so effective in eliciting an emotional response from the player that you'll be left staring at the wall, letting it all wash over and through you until it sweeps you away. I think a lot of people will experience the game's repetitive structure, its tedious feeling side quests, and its seemingly disconnected collection of gameplay elements, and come to the conclusion that Replicant is a weird and boring game, a product of its time that hasn't aged well. And you know what? You're not wrong to feel that way. I felt that way too. I was right there with you, until I got to the very last line in the game, which had me seeing everything from a whole new perspective. To better understand why Replicant was designed this way, it's important to know a bit about how Yoko Taro approaches game design. For Taro, the game itself is not important. The game is a tool. Its mechanics, its story, its themes and visuals all serve a higher, more important purpose, creating an emotional response, a spark within the player. If you watch some of his presentations, you'll quickly realize how deeply Yoko Taro thinks about the ways he can draw out this reaction, stacking layers of meaning and intent behind each and every design decision he makes. So why then does Replicant feel like it's full of fluff, you might wonder? What purpose does it serve, and why did they include it? What was the point? It's not like they don't know it's there. Weiss often comments on how the game has basically turned into a FedEx simulator. There is a reason for it, and that is to challenge the player's idea of what makes a game a worthwhile experience. One of the underlying questions NieR wants us to think about is, how are you choosing to spend your time, and do you think that time was spent meaningfully? The answer to that question will be different for each player depending on how they choose to view their experience. If you think the game needs an innovative story, deep gameplay mechanics, or engaging combat for it to be worthwhile, if the surface features are what's important to you, then running around collecting ingredients for the local tavern keeper with Weiss will feel like a chore. Nothing more than padding and filler, and you'll probably write this game off. However, if, over the course of this experience, the 5 runs, the fetch quests, the farming, fishing, and gathering, you found that you came to like the characters, NieR, Kaine, Weiss, and Emil, and enjoyed hanging out with them, learning about them and developing a connection to them, then the time you spent with them is the purpose, is the point. Even if what you were doing felt boring, repetitive, and mundane, it still had meaning and value because you got to spend time with the characters you love. Just like how relationships are in real life. At least, that's how I choose to see it. It could totally just be an artifact of old game design and I'm reading too much into it. Who knows? Unlike Automata, Replicant is a more personal journey, both for the characters and for the player. Each person who picks up the controller is likely to take away something different from the experience. For some, the game will be shelved after 10 hours. Others will connect deeply with the experience, and many more will fall somewhere in between. Like a walking contradiction, Replicant both falls short and exceeds expectations at the same time. As a game, Replicant can feel like a confusing patchwork of ideas and elements, just barely fitting together. But as an experience, Replicant succeeds at connecting with the player in a way that feels unmatched. 10 years on, this game can still hit. But it's ultimately up to the player to find it.